In this video, I'm going to go ahead and review the leg extension for the Bianchi M12 or UM84, as it's also known for the, I guess you could call it civilian version or whatever, which Bianchi still sells. And there's still some of these on the market, and there's no real special nomenclature for this. It just says, you know, Bianchi International. So I believe these are still on the market, plus the magazine pouches that actually can fit onto here. Now, from what I've seen, they're kind of clunky. They come up to about here, so if you're trying to do a straight draw, it can kind of push it out a little bit, and you'll have to, it looks like you would have to fumble with the holster bit. I haven't invested in any of those, but there's this channel, Pegasus Test, which I'll link in the description below. He did a video on this whole holster system, and I linked it in the description of my last video just on the holster. But I'm going to go ahead and give some of my own impressions, the work I've done with this, and I'll put in some extra footage from a training class that I did with this. So anyways, let's go ahead and get down to it. So it's pretty simple. You got standard belt loops here, and you got the web belt system here. Now, when I tried to take this clip out, because it's not really necessary if I'm just running out on normal pants, this is a pain in the butt. I haven't successfully been able to pull this out because it doesn't come out as much. It doesn't have room on both sides to kind of pull the plastic or rubberized polymer out to take this piece out. But my recommendation with this, with how low it sits, it's like the same height as a regular thigh holster, where it hangs really low on your cargo pocket. So if you're going to reach it, you kind of got to bend down depending on your arm length or what have you. And so my recommendation is really to just use this with the Alice LBV system, or the web belt system. And typically with that, you want to have it sit up a little bit higher, like the old school BDUs, where they had the pockets down here. If you have them a little bit higher, not only do you have accessibility of the pockets here, which is a good thing, more storage, but also, you know, it lifts it up a bit to where it should be, which is basically like hip pocket height, which is a lot easier to get to. And the good thing about this leg extender system for using it on the web belt, I'm a pretty small guy around the waist. I wear like a 32, so I'm not like a lot of larger people, where the more circumference you have, the more storage space you have, obviously. So getting 2 canteens, 2 ammo pouches, especially if you're just running the old school Alice LBE system in those pouches, it's not like the LBV 88 where you're taking away that need for the 2 pouches and putting it up here. That frees it up of those 2 pouches and allows you to carry 2 extra ammo pouches and pistol pouches, all this other stuff on the belt. Saves up space. But, you know, for me, regardless of what I do, I'm going to need this, because this is a lot bigger, and with the pistol grip out about this much, it's sitting level and taking up a lot of that room. This is a lot smaller, takes up a lot less room, and also getting it out of the way of that allows you to draw a lot quicker. Now, someone actually made a comment about the it being a suicide flap holster. You know, the comments on that are kind of interesting. There's plenty of people, including myself, that have found that this can actually be very intuitive and very easy to open, even though it is a flap system. It's not like something Velcro or a snap on another holster that I have to review, but the wind is out a lot today. But I don't find this to be too much of a hindrance, depending on how you set up your web belt system, or how high you ride your pants, how long your arms are, all these little combinations. But anyways, you know, this system is actually pretty nice, except for this part right here, these straps. As you can see here, I used electrical tape, and I got it to the size of my thigh, and I can always adjust it, but it stops it right here. And the problem with this is this thing can slide pretty freely on both ends. I don't know if you could do something like tie a knot in this to kind of prevent it from floating around side to side, but it can, even if you do that, this can still slide around a little bit. It's not like other thigh rigs where it has 2 straps that basically keep it pretty centered. You have this one preventing going this way, and this one preventing it from going that way. So it's not as stable as some of those, and it doesn't have any rubber or anything to catch it on, but it still works pretty well. And one of the good things about it moving freely like that is, if you're in the prone or something, you can move it out of the way or make it more accessible. If you're sitting down, you can move it up top. Like some pilots actually like this because they can move it up top and move the pistol out of the way, so it's not really cramming your legs in. It's like if you're in a vehicle or something like that, or you're just sitting down in general. So, you know, anyways, let's go ahead and get to some of the demonstrations and talk a little bit more about, you know, techniques for drawing when you're kind of just attaching this to the belt.
Reminded you. It was firm 0. Do 5 reps of singles and then 5 and then 5 doubles.
Nah, don't worry about that.
Did he 0 this one already? Okay, throwing a break.
This wasn't exactly made for the railed version, but we're gonna force it. Force the issue.
Out.
Guys, your percent body away from the gun.
Nice.
You done? Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to do some demonstrations here on, you know, techniques for drawing, and you've already seen the footage of me in the training class and just kind of doing a little work here and there on the holster. But I wanted to show you the actual technique that I have for my stature and using the holster, because it's actually a little bit different than basically just having it here on your hip. So with this holster, what I do is basically I have to reach down right to here. So if I don't have to really bend down, but I just put my hand all the way here, and depending on the gun that you have in here, I have a full-size 1911, which this holster fits really well. And so all I do is I basically put my hand all the way down, and I'm able to reach with my fingers this little D-ring flap, and I can pull down and away, and then I can draw the pistol. And okay, and reholstering, it's not too bad. So this came at a time when drop leg holsters weren't exactly in vogue yet. It does allow a lot of room on the web belt. It's pretty easy to, you know, have this thing moving around on you. So when you're running, this thing is going to sway a bit, and depending on the size of your pistol is going to move around a little bit. Now, the problem that I see with it moving around is you could actually end up settling it right here, and instead of being right down here, it's down here, or it's in front here. It can be kind of awkward to draw and pull it out, because when you go to grab the pistol grip, you end up pushing it more forward or end up pushing it more back. So that can provide a little bit of an issue for some people, but in general, this is not a bad system to have. Now, let me go ahead and demonstrate this in the kneeling. Okay, so if you're kneeling like this, it's actually pretty easy to draw. It's the same technique, and there. Okay, and then reholstering, it's not too bad. Sometimes the flap can get in the way on this. As you see here, the front side is kind of pushing this down and forward a little bit, but it doesn't really snag. This holster is pretty good at not having anything to really snag on a trigger, so it's pretty safe, as with you know, Kydex holsters and stuff. But the good thing about this flap is after you draw, the flap goes back down, so it protects it from anything kind of blocking it for the most part. So anyways, move the flap out, put it down. Now this is if your basically the holster knee is down, which is you know, my primary resting knee. This is typically how I would kneel. However, in some cases you might actually use the other leg, and this is where it can get kind of awkward. So depending on how you're kneeling, you're going back like this, and then you're pulling in, and so there we go. Alright, and then holstering up, pretty much the same thing. Obviously this thing's like trying to do its own thing, but depending on how you have it holstered, you know, it can be kind of awkward and go on its own program. But if you have it a lot higher, it'll typically go in this motion right here, basically where it's sitting down, so it's kind of like any other drop leg, but the advantage is it's still in a straight line. Some other drop legs that are more secure will go with your leg. And I apologize for the wind, it's probably hard to hear me right now, but basically what this does is this stiff arm right here, this leg extension is very stiff, so it keeps the thing pointing downwards, and it's more aligned with being perpendicular with your belt angle. So that's actually an advantage in my mind, because it can be very consistent. So there. Alright. Now, if there were some magazines on this holster, the one thing I would say is if you have any magazines here, I would just say this is an extra storage space for magazines. If you have the magazine pouch here, because the best way to fit it in, the only real good way to fit it in, is where they're actually, the floor plates are actually opposite from each other. So there's no good way to consistently draw. It's just a way to carry extra magazines, not your primary reload magazines. Don't carry them as your primary reload magazines is what I'm saying. If you're wearing like an Alice setup, I would just have a single mag pouch right here, or maybe you could do the double, but you could end up pulling both snaps, and then if you're moving around, going in the prone or something, that could actually fall out. It's happened to me. So I would carry the single one, that way when you draw it, there's nothing else that can fall out. And then you can plus it up when you're done, but if an emergency arrives, obviously you have something, somewhere to have that ammo, and you can it's accessible. But typically if you're down to the pistol, it's kind of an oh shit situation, I would think. But for the most part, most people aren't going to use the entire pistol magazine. But if you're using a 1911 and really needing it, you're probably going to be low on ammo, and you're probably going to need to do reloads. So yeah, there are different magazine pouch sizes that can carry a single stack and different double stacks. There's 3 different sizes from what I saw, maybe 4, but yeah, you cater it to whatever you need, or get multiple ones for your double stack and your single stack. That's just my recommendation. Okay, so my kind of closing statements on this is, it's not a bad system, but I think that the usefulness is isolated to the Alice LBE system. It saves space. I don't typically like thigh rigs if I can get away with it, unless I'm using other gear. And then of course, it's gonna give you a better advantage than trying to cram it on there and losing some storage space. That's just my 2 cents on that. So anyways, you can find these. They're readily available on eBay. There's other surplus sites that actually have them. They had kind of a low usefulness in the military from what I've seen. I never actually saw them when I was active, but doesn't mean that they weren't in rotation. So anyways, is it a good piece of gear to have around? Yes, it increases your capabilities, puts another tool in your toolbox depending on what you're doing. So yeah, with all that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Check out that video from Pegasus Tests, and also leave your own comment below, like this video, and you guys have a good one.